pious man among pious men, our priest of the orthogonal order humbly walks the parallel path.
Graven is a title I've been excited about since its announcement. An old-school fantasy shooter built with new-school tech that aims to be the Hexen 3 we never got, and maybe something a little more. Now, this beautiful work of blood and pixels has finally made its way to early access, allowing us shooter diehards to finally get a whiff of what this game has cooking. What's up everybody, I'm Kirk, and today we are jumping into Graven Early Access to see if this retro dish is tasting fine or needs a little more time in the oven. But before all that, please remember to subscribe and ring that bell for more videos involving dark sewers and forests. Alrighty, let's get kicking. Developed by Slipgate Ironworks and published by 1C Entertainment and 3D Realms, Graven is a first-person action-adventure puzzler with elements of immersive sims and action RPGs. Oh, and you can pet a dog too. I consider that an important highlight. Promised for the full release are 3 major hub worlds that spin off into numerous different environments, with a boatload of weapons, magical abilities, and quests. There is even a co-op multiplayer mode planned. But featured in this $25 early access build is the very beginning of the game, set in the first hub, consisting of the first 4 quests, with the initial weapons and magical abilities. It's on the short side, that's for sure, but is it enough to take the early plunge? Well, let's find out. Now, before we get into this, I want everyone to be aware that while I was putting this video together, the developers released a patch that addressed some of the early player feedback, enough to where I went back in and reevaluated some of my opinions and made changes to this edit. Therefore, while I will still be sharing my pre-patch critiques, this video does address patch number 1 and its improvements.
Even the humble heart feels wrath and righteous anger, giving birth to unknown strength.
In Graven, you play as a priest who is exiled from his order after murdering a fellow priest. A fellow priest who, by the looks of it, did something horrible to someone our hero cared deeply for. There's not much more to the story other than the initial setup and whatever tiny narrative tidbits the player might glean from exploring, but there was enough here to keep my interest piqued, and curious as to what may come next. The intro of Graven reminded me of the opening of Half-Life, and it functions in a similar way, giving the player a memorable introduction into this blighted, savage world they're about to step foot in. The rickety boat standing in for the tram, the seasoned ferryman, the intercom.
Much has not been taken care of since the plague arrived.
Hopping off of the boat, I was overcome with a desire to just explore. Graven is dense and sprawling, with nooks, crannies, and plenty of hidden treasures to uncover. It's a game littered with visual breadcrumbs, typically leading the player to something intriguing to see or find, and sometimes hinting at the adventure yet to come. It's an inviting world to explore, and part of what makes it so much fun to comb through is how beautifully rendered it is. I love the way Graven looks. The game goes for a retro styling meant to transport one back to the decade of Bill Clinton and beepers. But because the devs were able to harness the capabilities of the Unreal Engine, what we get in the end is a product that feels nostalgic but also fresh and aesthetically stimulating. The texture work is the thing I really want to highlight because it's just plain magnificent. Up close, textures look appropriately old school and pixelated. But when you take a step back, the overall composition appears so much more detailed and dimensional. The artistry on display here is just superb, and the use of color and hazy lighting creates an eerie atmosphere that at times reads more Lovecraftian than fantasy, which is a good thing. And the enemy designs are incredibly striking. I think 1C and 3D Realms should consider putting out an art of book. I know I would snatch it up immediately. Performance-wise, the game ran decently. I did run into some slowdown here and there, but nothing a few tweaks to the graphical settings couldn't fix. But the game does have a nasty habit of hitching when loading into new areas and autosaving. Not anything outrageous, but something to watch out for. The game is a little buggy. Nothing that really hurt the experience for me, but there's definitely some roughness in this game that I hope gets sanded down in future updates. For gameplay, the town of Cruxforth serves as your hub zone, a place that perhaps knew prosperity and happiness at one point, but is now on its last legs, keeping the dangers of the outside world at bay. It's a cool town to explore, but there's not a lot to do here at the moment other than get quests and visit the blacksmith. The blacksmith who unfortunately is not functioning as of the recent patch, but is planned to offer upgrades for your arsenal. From Cruxforth, you can travel to the 3 current outside zones that hold your quests. Quests, of course, feature plenty of exploring and shooting, but to my surprise, they have a healthy focus on puzzles. There's actually one puzzle in particular involving this rotating totem that had me flat out stumped. In fact, I think the devs should consider throwing in one more hint for this one, as I felt the clues were a little too vague. It's a good indication, though, of what sorts of puzzles we might expect in the future. Hey, as long as they keep the moon logic out of it, I say bring it on. Otherwise, the level design is solid, featuring layouts that circle back on themselves with plenty of key hunting, hidden shortcuts, and secrets, and some nice verticality. There were times I did get confused as to where to go or what to do next, which did get a little annoying. There's a particular turtle key door that drew my ire, but as of the last patch, the devs are taking steps to help players navigate better and give them hints as to what to do next. I do have another criticism of the level design relating to combat, but we'll touch on that a little later. The way Graven handles progression is interesting. Quests have to be completed in one go. If you quit the game and come back later, you have to start the quest over. Only when you've completed the quest does the game truly save your progress. I don't really get why the game works this way. Sure, I can respect a developer discouraging players from quick save cheesing through a quest, but let's say my computer crashes, or there's a power outage. I don't think it's necessarily fair for me to lose my progress. To be fair, the player's inventory is always saved, so whatever items you might have gained in a quest might help you repeat progress faster. But I feel like the better route is to have a quest save whenever you complete an objective and not the entirety of it. That I think would be a lot more fair. Graven also features no manual saves. Respawn points act as your checkpoints, represented by these perching crows. Obviously, if you die, you come back here. However, if you quit the game to desktop and then reload it, you will always start back at the hub, and there's no way back to your old respawn point besides walking to it. This likely goes along with the whole complete the quest in one go idea, but funnily enough, after quitting the game, if you manage to kill yourself in the hub world, you will have the option of starting back at the last activated respawn point. A nice little loophole, although I don't see the big deal in offering the player the choice between reloading in the hub or reloading in their last respawn point.
Don't forget your staff, priest. It's the only thing that will keep you alive.
During your adventure, you'll have 2 constants in your inventory, your staff and magical book. The staff is your multi-purpose whack stick. You'll use it to break stuff and protect yourself. In its default form, it's rather weak, but eventually you can outfit it with a green stone that not only makes it stronger, but also breaks specific green cracked barriers. Keep an eye out for those when you play this. They're placed in some sneaky spots. By the looks of it, Graven is going to give us more stones to play around with, but the green is what we got so far for early access. The spellbook is self-explanatory, holding all the magical abilities the player will be able to find throughout Graven's adventure. Inflame is the first magical tool the player will find, and as the name suggests, it lets you light stuff on fire. Or rather, some of the stuff on fire. Specific wood, cobwebs, and rotting human flesh can be set ablaze, often opening up passageways for the player to progress. Unfortunately, all the other seemingly flammable things in the environment, like furniture or grass, cannot be set on fire. Seriously? This is a fireplace. And I should also stress, this is not a weapon. Well, not directly. Trying to light enemies on fire sadly yields no results. The most you'll do is catch their clothing on fire, which as far as I can tell does little to no damage. But lighting an explosive barrel sitting near them will. Discharge is the other spell featured and was also added in the recent update. It shoots out electricity which will stun enemies and also pairs well with pools of water. Combat in Graven is a mixture of melee and shooting, and so far it's executed cleanly, with lots of brutality. Melee is nothing fancy. You can swing, you can block, but you definitely get a visceral sense of slamming a solid piece of something into a soft piece of something, like hitting a watermelon with a steel baseball bat, a testament to the game's sound design and delightfully gruesome gore effects. Shooting brings a similar satisfaction. The sense of impact from your weapons is right on, and seeing the shambling dead go splat is a treat of violence. Graven's arsenal is a modest but chunky assortment of fantasy implements. My go-to for most of my playthrough was the basic sword, which is great for most of the enemies, especially if you're light on your feet and quick with your block. The cuff arrow is a mini crossbow that fits on your wrist. It behaves as the pistol-type weapon, and its value is truly felt with distant or airborne enemies. I also thought it looked a lot like the mini crossbow from Deus Ex. The fletchant blasts out tiny barbs that can tear enemies apart. Think of it like the shotgun. And then we have the peat burner. Ooh, I like this guy. What looks like a medieval washing machine is a red-hot implement of fiery death, shooting out timed explosives that stick to enemies and makes them go boom boom. Nice. Enemy AI is not great. Most baddies you'll encounter are plague-ridden zombies who by nature are supposed to be mindless, which is fine. But eventually you'll encounter these staff-wielding cultists whose behavior boils down to move a little, throw a thing, and then wait for you to come kill them. That's assuming they even hear you or see you. Another thing to note is that before the update, the enemies didn't really put up much of a fight. For example, these brutish Urukai-looking fools have some spongy health and hard-hitting attacks, but all they do is walk towards you slowly, making it real easy to just sit back and shoot them in the face. It got to the point where, because of the lack of challenge, combat started to feel boring all around. In fact, at times I opted to just run past enemies out of impatience. The update, though, made the enemies more aggressive, harder to stun lock, and also limited the ammo drops, which were quite abundant, especially for the fletchant and peat burner. It was an improvement. The build still leans towards the easy side, but it's not as much of a cakewalk as before. Crossing my fingers that the later updates bring more of a challenge in terms of combat. The other thing that contributed to my boredom was the initial lack of options within combat. Before Graven's update, my overall critique was that, for a game that takes influence from immersive sims and gives you some cool stuff to play with, the level and combat design lacked ways for players to experiment and take out enemies creatively. For example, Graven features a kick ability, which is awesome for breaking stuff, playing soccer, and Sparta kicking zombies down the stairs. But for whatever reason, there weren't any hazards you could kick enemies into, like pits of lava, for example, or spikes. I remember at one point having the idea to kick over a lit metal torch to see if it would topple over and light enemies on fire. But no dice. I know that's a very specific thing, but I was genuinely bummed I couldn't do this. The Inflame spell was another example. Sure, you can light explosives on fire, but why can't I burn anything else to use against enemies? Like all this brush and grass everywhere. Fortunately, the update addressed this very issue. So now, enemies can be kicked into spikes or off cliffs, and a hazard was added to take advantage of Inflame, these puffs of poison gas which can be ignited. It's a start, and I'm not sure if the devs turned this around real quick because of player feedback or if they already had it on deck, but either way, I'm happy they did. Granted, it's not perfect, like electrifying a pool of water to fry an enemy when suddenly another one walks into it and is miraculously unaffected. And this system can definitely be pushed further. In fact, I hope the devs really focus on making the combat deeper with more options and flexibility, so that players feel empowered to experiment and really make this combat system their own. I know Graven isn't necessarily meant to be a hardcore immersive sim, but I think leaning even heavier into its influence will only help this game stand out and be more memorable. While I have my criticisms, I'm generally pretty positive on Graven. I'm eager to explore more of its gorgeous retro world, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the combat and puzzles evolve with future updates. However, I'm afraid I'm not really comfortable recommending this early access build, for the simple reason that I don't think there's enough here to justify the $25 price tag. As I said in the beginning of the video, this build is pretty short. The initial quests, the initial weapons, the initial abilities, and right when things really start to get going, it ends. To me, a good early access title should feature a sizable portion of the final game and most of the features complete. I hate to say it, but right now Graven feels like a demo with a steep price tag. The good news though is that Graven's early access roadmap is available, and if all goes according to plan, we should be seeing a major update this summer featuring the multiplayer mode, all leading up to the full release slated for early 2022. So it's not going to be too much of a wait for more content. Hopefully. If you are someone who cannot wait to play this and want to get in early, and more importantly, offer feedback to the devs who are craving it by the looks of it, then by all means, jump in and help out. Otherwise, just wait. Definitely keep this firmly on your radar, but just wait. What are your thoughts on Graven? Have you had the chance to play the early access release, and what improvements would you like to see? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, like, and ring the bell for notifications on future uploads. It's a few clicks for you, but a massive help for this channel. Also, be sure to come say hi in the Kirk Collects Discord, linked in the description below. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.